Hey, it's Katie Moran. Here's your Heartfelt Lift. Today I'm here with.
Sam Eaton of Recklessly Alive.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I love your story because it really shows how people can transform and how those moments where we feel most alone can become a point of connection with other people when we get to a place of transformation. So, can you tell me a little bit about your story from when you had your suicide attempt to how you've had over 200 plus motivational speaking events where you talk about suicide prevention?
Absolutely. So I really struggled with depression and anxiety all through high school and college, but nobody had ever stood up in front of me and said, here's what depression is, here's what suicidal thoughts are. And so I didn't talk to anybody. I think I talked to one counselor. I told one friend at one point. Both of them reacted super bad. They both kind of
Mhm.
stopped talking to me. The counselor just kind of disappeared. And so I didn't tell anyone about how hard it was to live in my brain. It was every day was difficult. And those thoughts slowly over time went from what if to when and how.
Mm.
So I attempted at 23 after my life just really hit rock bottom. I had a ton of student loan debt. I had a really important relationship that had ended. I was living at home where all this trauma had happened from my childhood that I hadn't dealt with or processed. I was teaching, I didn't like my job, and I truly just couldn't see a way out. And suicide at its most basic level is when someone's pain is higher than their ability to cope. And so at 23, I hadn't been to therapy. I didn't have the tools that I have now to deal with when life got that painful. And so after my attempt, luckily I chose to stay. And in the most courageous moment of my whole life, I chose to stay and I survived that. And I immediately knew I wanted to use all the pain that I had experienced to help somebody else. I didn't think it would be about suicide. I didn't ever plan to talk about suicide. It wasn't something you talked about, especially 10 years ago. And I was teaching at the time, and in about 2016, we actually had four people who died by suicide in our school district. We had two students, a teacher, and a principal in one school year who all took their own life. And with each one, we would get an email, and I just had this deep push in my chest to like I had to do something to help, and I had no clue what that could be. I just knew I had to do something, and I had a story around this that maybe that could help someone. So I read that talking about suicide doesn't make it any more likely that someone will attempt and makes it much more likely they'll seek help. And that's one of the biggest lies that I hear is that, well, we can't talk about this because you'll put the idea there. And if you look at the statistics, those ideas are already there, and there isn't any research that supports that. It all says that talking about it opens those lines of communication. It helps people feel seen and heard, and then we can start to get them help and get them on a path to healing. And so it started very slow. I just spoke at a couple teen centers, a couple churches when they asked. It was like 15 minutes long. And then over time, more and more people were asking because there's such a huge need. Eventually, I started an Instagram. I didn't even have social media at that time of my life. I don't love social media, but it's such a great way to reach people and help people. And so I try to just be the person that I needed at that moment. And whatever that is, whether that's speaking or writing my book, putting out content, I'm just like, what are the little encouragements, the little tips, the little mental health hacks that I've learned to help people who are where I was?
That's so beautiful. If you had one message for people who might be in the place that you were, what would you say to them today?
First and foremost, it's that your brain can lie to you. We don't have to believe everything that we think. So often, when we're in those dark places, we don't feel joy. We don't feel anything. Our brain is truly sick. We're not seeing the world as it is. They've even scanned suicidal brains, and they found that the part of your brain that has empathy doesn't light up. So that feeling of like other of understanding other people and them understanding you, it's sick. Your brain isn't firing the way that it's supposed to. And when you start there, then you're like, oh, well, what do we do when we're sick? We get help and we take care of ourselves and
Mm.
we go to the hospital or whatever it is. That really helped change me and be like, you know what? I'm not broken. It's not me. I'm sick like the flu. And just like the flu, there's ways to get better. And so if you're trapped in that dark place, if you're feeling like there's no hope, I promise you that your brain is lying to you. I promise you there are so many people that care about you, that want you to stay. And the world truly would be a much worse place without you around. Whether your brain can believe that today or not, the world is better because you are here.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure.